Hello, everyone. Welcome to the series of interviews with cybersecurity experts. I'm your Iva Tasheva, Cyen co-founder, and today's guest is Max Killinger. He is a CIO and Vice President of Corporate IT at Hoffmann Group. Welcome, Max.
Hi, Iva.
I met Max at one event in Amsterdam a few months back, and Max's experience struck me as very unique. We wanted to share with you also his experience as accomplished executive in the field of information technology, often in cybersecurity we feel underrepresented or not understood by IT, but here Max comes to represent security and IT together, and it's a good we can learn a lot from his experience bringing those international experience as well as leading strategic IT initiative across different industries. Max, you're now working for Hoffmann Group, which is a German company. Can you tell us a little bit about Hoffmann Group? What is its core business and how it came around as a successful European business?
Sure. So, hello, everyone, and thanks for having the chance to talk here together with you, Iva. I was looking forward to that. So, Hoffmann is a more than 100-year-old business selling tools. So, basically, quality tools for B2B business. We are, from a size point of view, we are at 3,000 employees with 1.3 billion revenue. That's rough numbers, bit more, bit less. And when I was starting at Hoffmann at 2017, this was a situation like a SME, because the IT I was finding there was no IT at all. This was let's say, roughly 30 people, technical guys, really good guys, not discussion there, but there was no organization and no functionality you need to make sure that an IT really brings value to the company. You find this in many SMEs, so a small team of very good technicians doing the job, but that's not enough to support such a company of that size. So that's Hoffmann.
Yes, indeed. This is, I think, something that we all SMEs struggle with. It's limitation. So part of the grow is to outgrow yourself. And by nature, this is painful because suddenly you have one IT guy or girl, and now you need to serve not anymore 5 people, but 50 people and 100 people and more complex infrastructure that becomes a challenge. What was your experience in terms of prioritizing this investment or in general security? How can you prioritize what to do in security in a situation of limited resources, but also without real visibility on the threats that are specific to you, to your specific industry or organization in a situation where you're not cybersecurity expert yet?
Yeah, that's exactly the point. Because companies grow and some functions do not grow fast enough, and then you have to take care that they grow with the company. And what you need at first, two things. You need to have let's say, the understanding of the situation. So to understand what cybersecurity threats are really. And that's not only phishing and email, that's much, much more. And if you get a bit more understanding of that, you can try to imagine and build something what is defending yourself, your company, to stay in business or to not being having some harms from threats, from attacks, from something coming into your IT and disturbing, but also disrupting everything. That's the first thing. The second thing is you need at least some guy, some expertise in how to do the defending, how to defend yourself, how to implement something in your architecture, in your infrastructure that is helping you, that an attacker is not so easygoing and just jumping in. And there it starts to get a bit complex, because there are so many tools out in the market. And from my point of view, it's much easier to keep your infrastructure, your IT assets very uncomplex. Go to like Microsoft M365, use what they have, and start to at least secure two things. Your client, there are very easy client hardening guidelines and even functionalities where you make sure that your client is really safe. Your client is the interface of your users, of the people working in your on your data to what is in the backend and where the data is. And the second thing is know your assets, know where your crown jewels are, and try to make sure that the access to them is very good defended. It is that you recognize if something is weird in your infrastructure, so monitoring or making sure that you get some insights on anomalies happening in your infrastructure. And if you are good at that, that's the starting point. And if you need some help for that, so that we are talking about the basics, and there's a very good basic, and that's the basic security guideline from Germany's National Cybersecurity Authority. I guess that there are more of these guidelines in other countries, but they help because you need something to understand that, and this is like a cooking book to do something. So that's the basic thing. Maybe a short story, because how do things really happen? And I have a very good expert in my team, and he told me just 2 weeks ago that he has a son, and his son started a new business. And his son asked for his father and said, "Hey, can you help me? Because I'm a good guy in business. I started something else, not IT, but you know IT. Can you do something that I'm safe?" And he was there for 1 weekend, and he did exactly what I just said. He's made sure that the clients are hardened. He made sure that the infrastructure and how they work is safe. And this took a weekend, and that's the basics. And then you need to go on and need to evolve. And there's an iterate way to find out. Go for experts. There are experts in the market. Let them help you. That's always a matter of cost, yes, but the money is good invested, because you also have the risk in mind. When you are stopping your business because of that, there's much more trouble.
No, of course, our audience knows that we are also cybersecurity consultants. So obviously, I didn't make you say it, but I subscribe to it, and I can speak as an SME myself. We have tons of different issues. Yesterday, I had to learn how to do basically accounting the new way for the European Commission specific rules, which are different for every project and situation. And at some point, I realized, wait, it's not my role, as a CEO or as a business driver or leader. You don't need to know it all, and sometimes it just takes so much more energy and time and money for you to learn or to train your people on extra things that is not their core business. Better to hire someone that comes with this expertise. This is what experts do every day. You wouldn't want to cure yourself and do medicine suddenly for it. You would go to a doctor, right? It's just more practical and a little bit safer option. Yes, very good story, and lucky for your for your colleague's son that they had someone at their reach. But often, what happens is that you have this one support at the beginning, and you think, I'm safe, right? Someone checked it up, I'm set up, so I can go smoothly. But technology is emerging. We as business owners, everyone tries to be as innovative as possible to either optimize processes or just stay ahead of the curve of competition. And we see more and more business leaders saying, yes, I adopt AI. They have no clue what for, what purpose, or how. They just know they have to do it. And this is increasing the complexity of saying, okay, I am still safe, right? Because every day there is completely new technology or situation you introduce in your company. Supply chain as well. You mentioned rely on the supplier, which is as the basic is a good start, but then every supplier you kind of hand over a lot of the responsibilities and accountability, and sometimes it's not something that is mutually understanding what is the accountability and responsibility in the sense of supply chain. Not every supplier has a responsibility to protect you. Everyone has a responsibility to protect their own infrastructure and business, and this is often the case for cloud. But the data, your application, this is your responsibility.
Yeah.
It gets even more complex. How to tackle all these evolving risks, but also complexities in supply chain and introducing new layer of technology that is not always perfectly understood.
Well, that's a very, very large question. And but thank you for that, because that's the world we are living when we are doing the consulting on one hand and having our company like yourself. So let's tackle one thing first, AI. You talked about AI and everybody is looking for AI. One hint for that, don't lose your identities, because there are many AI tools out there. They take your data, and I'm not talking about Copilot or ChatGPT. I'm talking about much more generic tools where you hand over your identity and think this is a cool thing, and it translates something in with your identity in videos. Be very careful for that. Look at that companies, where they come from. Do they really come from a state where you trust, or do they really handle the data in a trustful way, and so on. So this is one hint for AI. Second hint for AI would be, I think it's a hype where the curve is at the moment a little bit going down, because many companies, many leaders find out it's not so easy to really get value out of that. So, and many say it's a field where we have to do more, and not only talk but really do something. But on the other hand, the attackers do the same. So they are able to start attacking with a speed we don't even recognize today. So this attacker surface on our side, but the attacker tooling on the other side is really a bit. It's making myself also a bit struggling, because we don't know how fast they are, and therefore it's good if you have an infrastructure which is good protected, and you have enough time when it comes in, that it doesn't take your crown jewels. And your third question was about supply chain, or your second point. Supply chain, yeah, in fact, I'm with you. It seems like you are handing over responsibility, but you don't. Because there is responsibility that your supply chain, or in our case, it's our logistic. Our logistic is doing the job of delivering our customers each day, and an hour off of our logistic is costing a lot of money. And when you hand over responsibility to third parties, they do a job for you. But when they fail, it's not harming them, it's harming you. Your logistics, your production, your value chain is at risk at that point. And therefore, the question is, what can you do? Try to take over as much of that responsibility, and even take over the technology with people. So make your own risk assessment in how much value do I lose if I don't, or if I'm not able to manage what the external company does. And if I'm not able to do that, and I'm kind of helpless, then I have to act. I have to do something. I have to hire an expert or two or three, making sure that my company is able to help myself in case of this supply chain support, or external company is off, for example. They can be hacked. They can be hacked in a way that that the hacker enters my company, on the way they are doing with the support, with the remote support. They can be hacked in a way that they are out of business, and then I'm lost. So that's how I would definitely act. So risk management, and looking for and assessing for what is the value I could lose, and what can I invest to counteract this situation. So that would be my sense for that.
Mhm. And much of being able to act is to understand what could happen and what are the threats to be able then to measure probability. Of course, we always have to remember we work with limited resources, time, energy, and money, and expertise as well. So, is there any, I don't know, services or how do you get this information for SMEs? What is the biggest threat, for instance, threat intelligence or risk intelligence, where they can find this information to make adequate decisions?
Yeah, for that, because they in a SME you have mostly you have technicians, but maybe you need an organization who is going to you and doing exactly not the technology, but the risk assessment. And there's a threat landscape you can make up and look where are you affected or which are the threats which are coming in. Yeah, everybody knows that email is one of the largest threat every company has, because 90% of the cases, or more than 90%, are starting with an email and the user clicking on something. But that's not that case for when you have. I always think of our logistics, and we have companies supporting this logistics from external, and if they fail, that's a problem. So we have to look exactly um,
Mhm.
uh, on this edge of where they come in and where they do the job and where something can happen, or the field of their operation, for example, the the basic technology for where our parcels run around in our logistics. And if this stops, then logistics is dead. So that's the field to look into. Maybe you have then in next step somebody who's using some technology, putting in a probe or having a monitoring an anomaly um, sensors to find if there's something not like it should. So that could be some effects afterwards. But in any case, you need a company which is helping and which has the experience to show you the threat situation in what you is. And threat does not only mean surface threat, but also the attack paths. This is what we are doing today. We are not looking on, like if you have a small assessment and you find out that some servers are not patched. That's not the problem. The problem is the attack path from the entry point of an
Mhm.
attack until your crown jewels, or your, let's say, your services which do not have to be disturbed. And if you have
Mhm.
this tree of these attack paths, you can look into this path and maybe just take out or solve two or three or four first in a prioritization finding, and then you're quite safe because you at least have these paths. And then what is behind is not so important because nobody can go there, but this is the visibility. In
Mhm.
some cases, I've seen that um, if you have such a company coming in with a checklist and they tell you what all these vulnerabilities are, this is nice,
Yeah.
but vulnerabilities can be a lot. But if they sum up to a path where it's easy to come in, that's your problem, and that's something where you have to look at.
Mm. We have had a lot of discussions on the vulnerability issue because eventually at some point there was uh, okay, let's say when you were speaking, I thought regulators are moving a little bit faster than industry, and I'll tell you why after. But on the vulnerabilities, there's a lot of pressure not to have critical vulnerabilities or actively exploited vulnerabilities, either in products with the CRA or in organizations like financial sector. And suddenly everyone realized, wait, the way we manage vulnerability is not appropriate for this kind of an objective, because the fact that you have a vulnerability doesn't mean that you are actually exposed on the internet for everyone to break in. That only means that we are maybe scanning not the right things, assessing not the right things, and not calling it the right way. So there is a big discussion going on of how to do this adequately. And here I'm going back because what you said about comprehensive. assessment. So you have to know your situation, not just look in one pillar here, one dot there. Is there in the, let's say it's very challenging to look at the comprehensive situation, and in that sense, I think regulators moved a little bit faster, or they are trying to push the industry in the right direction by not saying you have to have this or that in place. They say you have to have adequate security measures. Adequate means in its comprehensiveness, have adequate decisions to protect what matters most. So not everything, not the Rolls Royce of security, but adequate to your situation and to your needs. Um, do you see in this adequateness blind spots for SMEs, things that they don't focus enough to be able to have this adequate cybersecurity for them?
Yes, it's a guess because I'm not quite too sure that in every SME that is, but I think, and the experience I have, it's going very fast to buy a tool like CrowdStrike or just name it, anything. And the tools are, that sentence, a fool with a tool is still a fool. It does not help really, because you have to manage the tool and you have to manage a process before. So if you're able to have a stable process, which is recognizing attacks, and on one hand, having, let's say, a service, you can do that also outsourced, calling somebody, hey, look, there's some attack happening, you have to do something. Then there's somebody acting at that situation, and you plan that, because you have to be aware that this is a playbook, you're running through this, and then he's acting and he's stopping the attack and making sure that nothing really happens. This playbook in our company happens some more than one time a week. That's just running through.
Okay.
And that's very normal. But if an SME is not at that level, then you forget about that. You have your tools. Sometimes you look into it. Sometimes you get an alarm. Sometimes you get hundreds of alarms and do not react because you don't see the tree in the forest. And if you are making sure that you have a process to follow this very in a certain manner, then this is a maturity level you can gain. And you need that, because you have to make sure that you are safe, and not just to have installed a tool and using whatever technology. That's not enough. It's technical and it's organizational.
So I can definitely confirm what you say from my own observations, being a consultant working across different companies. And this is what I always tell them. So in NIST, we have the different stages from govern, identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. What always happens, I go in a company and they have things for protect. They don't govern, didn't identify what is actually the risk for them, but they put some protection measures. So this is the first thing every company does. And the least prepared I see them in the monitoring, actually. Even if they start preparing incident response procedures, because they understand, if it happens to me, I have no clue. So you prepare some documents, some procedures, but if you lack, as you said, effective monitoring, then you might figure out there's a problem too late to be able to tackle it. So I definitely relate and see what you're saying is very representative for SMEs across the board, and even large companies. There's not much difference in that sense. And speaking about incidents, can you give an example of a real world incident or a near miss where maybe you've seen the mechanism working well, or maybe it didn't work well, as an example of showcasing this drill?
Okay, let's face two things. One is an example. I don't use names or companies, but when you've outsourced an ERP, for example, and suddenly you find out that this ERP is not there anymore. And this is happening. This has happened. I've made this experience, and the company unfortunately made this experience as well. This was a very bad time in the lifetime of this company. They had a service partner delivering their ERP, and the whole service partner was hacked. So they were lost of ERP system for, I think this was more than 2 weeks, and that's that case which happens. You cannot do anything, but you can, for yourself, you can say, I do not take the risk, I do it myself, or I rarely select my service partner in a way with certifications. But they do help a bit, but not. But if you have a trustful service partner, which is also doing security and which is showing you how he is protecting your crown jewels, because for certain companies, the ERP is the life, the blood and the heart of the company.
Yeah.
So this is the one thing. The other thing, what we find out currently, many times, that emails from vendors from us coming in, and they are obviously hacked in a way, because what happens now, I think maybe somebody also in that environment knows about Mamba 2FA. It's about tokens. It's not anymore just about passwords or something, but in our world you have more than one factors to authenticate, and it is now possible that mailboxes from Microsoft, for example, can be taken over by stealing tokens. And if this happens, somebody takes over the mailbox without the knowledge of the owner and can send emails and can do whatever he wants. And we have recognized more and more emails coming in from vendors. They are definitely coming from that mailbox, but they're not sent by the person. And they want to change bank accounts or something. And and you find out that this is happening. And there's something where you have to look at on yourself. For example, we have one solution now bringing in doing token security by Fido sticks. That's a hardware token protection. You might say, I'm not the deepest technologist here, but we protect ourselves now more than just with passwords and a second factor. We have to do that. So this is happening all the day. This one of this real world experience.
Indeed. So as we move more online, obviously there is more at stake with every identity and with every
Yeah,
access. So this is your advice to then look into the identity and the communication
yeah.
security. And besides, so what would be your advice actually besides looking at it, what can companies practically do to secure the email communication or tokens in general?
Yeah, basically, again, use a very secure email provider, or go to Microsoft or go to Google or whatever, and do not use some unsecure mechanisms. Make sure that it's not just a password. Yeah. Um, Everybody
Yeah.
knows today that it needs more than just a password. And I said this in the beginning, um, protect your identities. And Entra ID is a very cool thing, but it's also, you need experience to make sure that Entra ID does the job. Protect your identities, and therefore also protect the assets which are used. And when you are not able to protect them completely, build something where you can sense if something is not working. We have such a software in place which is also finding out, because of geo-located logins which cannot happen at the same time. It's protecting not 100%, because sometimes if this is on the same location, then it could not protect, but you can find out anomalies, and there's software for that. This can do it. And these software products, meantime, also use AI, and then you get at least the awareness of something is going wrong, which you would not see otherwise.
I see. Yes, yes, yes. Okay. So there is technology to help you identify. Again, you have to do it for you, act upon it on your own. No one is going to do it for you unless it's
Yeah,
absolute fraud across platform. But you spoke a little bit about technology, a lot about the processes. Do you see a difference then in terms of how SMEs and large companies can tackle the questions? Is it eventually the same steps at different dose, or how do you see the size of the company ultimately
Yeah,
grow?
yeah, that's a very good question because I would say, does size matter in that case?
Mm.
And for the basic principle, it does not matter because every company has to look for authentication and if this does work and if you really protect your identities and your assets, that's the same. Second, and it's a very old step you do, segment your infrastructure. So take care that not only the attack surface is clean, but also the infrastructure after that has segmentation. It's not so easy to just jump to your crown jewels, and then look on the on the user interfaces on the notebooks and all your devices and protect them that there's nothing happen. So also software for that with looking into that client and making sure that it's hardened. If you have at least these three steps in a way secured, could be much more, then this is for SMEs, and for large companies basically the same. It's just a matter of let's say scaling the number of pieces, the number of or the size of your infrastructure background, the number of systems and services you provide or products you have in your IT to protect and make sure that business is running. So that
Mhm.
for this, and I think SMEs can do that. And if they have a good partner for that, they they can help themselves getting more speed and going directly
Mhm.
in a situation where the leadership there can sleep better. Because I would not sleep well when, as soon as this is not protected enough.
No, I see. Indeed, what you said as well, it's okay, the same pill, but in different dose, basically, for the
Mm.
basic principles. If you're not a doctor, look for help. If
Yeah,
someone to
yeah,
prescribe the right pill for you before spending tons of money on ineffective security. And also, if you are looking to grow, make sure you have a proper governance in place to scale,
yeah,
because you give it as a given, but it's not easy to scale a lot of technologies and processes and people. So you have to be governed properly. Thank you so much, Max. Very insightful. We can leave your contact details maybe in the chat so people can contact you or follow you on LinkedIn for further of your interesting talks. Thank you.
thank you as well.
And for everyone, don't forget to subscribe so that you can see many of other interesting interviews we have with cybersecurity experts.